With each passing day, Bambi and Kike became more determined to make Gabriel, the boy who held the entire school's fascination, their own. Unbeknownst to Bambi, the young crush she longed for was her own cousin. Gabriel, a poor, deaf and mute 14-year-old, sat alone in his dimly lit room, staring at a letter that had arrived mysteriously that evening. The message was short, almost urgent. "Meet us at the old school block. We have something important for you." He knew he should stay in and study, but this invitation, sent by someone from the school where he worked, tugged at his curiosity. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something unknown, yet he reluctantly stepped out into the cold, darkening night. It was raining heavily by the time he arrived, past 7, as shadows gathered around the abandoned school block. Gabriel waited, shivering and soaked, wondering if he had made a mistake. Then, from the darkness, 2 masked figures emerged, each gripping large sticks, their faces concealed but their rage unmistakable. Gabriel's heart pounded, dread settling over him. Were these human or something else? He wanted to scream, to run, but his voice, like so many other times, remained silent. "You!" one of the girls hissed from behind her mask, fury flashing in her eyes. "You went and reported us to the principal, didn't you?" Gabriel's chest tightened in confusion and fear. He hadn't reported anyone. He had no idea what they were talking about. But his silent protests went unheard as the girl's anger intensified. "We trusted you, and this is how you repay us," the second girl sneered. "Tonight, you'll learn never to cross us." "Since you want to destroy my life," the leader of the group said, "I will destroy yours first. You will learn a lesson today. You will never forget." And so, with cold precision, the girls began to strike Gabriel, their sticks crashing down as he crumbled beneath them. Powerless to defend himself, Gabriel felt his hope and his innocence shatter as they dragged him into the shadows of the empty building. There they committed the unthinkable. They began taking off their clothes as they raped him, one after the other, taking turns, each act breaking Gabriel further as they stole his virginity that night. Gabriel, unable to speak, was trapped in his silent world, his tears mixing with the cold rain. When it was over, Gabriel lay bruised and trembling, his vision blurred, his body broken. The 2 girls laughed cruelly, mocking his silence as they began to pull off their masks. But Gabriel's fading consciousness only offered him brief glimpses of their faces, the details swimming just out of reach. "You want to know why we did this?" one of them taunted, her tone venomous. "Because we can. Because no one will ever believe you and no one would ever care." Before he could react, she struck him one last time, and his world went dark. Later, as the girls dragged Gabriel's limp body to the forest behind the school, they argued in panicked whispers, uncertain of what they'd done. "Did we kill him?" one of them asked, her voice trembling. But before they could decide what to do, a rustling from the bushes startled them, sending them fleeing into the night. They didn't see the old woman who had been distracted by their noise and had come to see who was there. Her lantern cast a faint glow in the rain as she moved cautiously through the shadows. But she was only able to see 2 girls racing away frantically. She did not see their faces. When she approached Gabriel's lifeless form, her heart sank. She recognized him, the kind, silent boy she had seen around the village. Her mind raced with horror and anger. She had to save him. She had to find out who could commit such evil against someone so vulnerable. And as the rain poured down, the old grandma carried Gabriel's lifeless body, praying earnestly in her heart that he should stay alive. They have to find the people, the evil ones who had left him there in the middle of the night, in the cold forest to die. McJohnson sat alone in the dim glow of his office, the heavy scent of cigarette smoke filling the room. His mind circled back to one relentless thought: revenge. Today, he would finally confront the agony that had haunted him for so many years. In his mind, he was 7 years old again, bound to a chair in a dark warehouse, powerless as disguised armed men, his late father's enemies, tore his life apart. He remembered his desperate cries, pleading for mercy, begging them to spare his father. But his pleas had been met with silence, his father's final words lingering as a haunting command. "Son, don't die here tonight. Avenge me." McJohnson had survived that night, and today he was prepared to fulfill his father's dying wish, ready to lay to rest the pain that had shaped him. A voice broke his concentration, with a wedding guest calling from the doorway. "The service is about to commence, sir. Your presence is needed." McJohnson glanced up with a faint grin. "Oh, is it?" he replied, setting his cigarette aside. "I'll be out shortly." Rising, he sprayed on cologne, masking the stale smoke that clung to his suit. Today, he was standing in as a father for his little sister, Rose. Today, he would play his part. He joined the gathering, wearing a mask of calm as he stepped into a living room alive with joy. Laughter and chatter filled the air as Rose emerged, beaming when she saw McJohnson. She embraced him tightly, gratitude radiating in her eyes to her elder brother for being there for her all her life and for what he was doing for her today, on her special day. McJohnson returned her hug, his face warm but his heart cold. As the ceremony began, he led her down the aisle, a moment of happiness Rose would always remember. Her groom, Dotun, stood at the altar, his face lighting up as he saw Rose approaching. His blue eyes sparkled with admiration, and as vows were exchanged, the atmosphere turned festive. Guests danced at the reception, filling the mansion with celebration until the evening's end. Later that night, with the guests gone, Rose and Dotun retired to their room, savoring their quiet moment together. In the intimacy of their bedroom, Dotun held Rose close, his breath warm against her neck. But just as passion filled the air, a noise from downstairs shattered their world. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Hadn't everyone left? Who could be there? What they didn't know was that armed intruders had breached the mansion, now making their way up the stairs. Dotun and Rose approached their bedroom door, intending to check on the strange sounds, but they were met by a shocking sight. The armed men stormed into the room, forcing Dotun to the floor at gunpoint. "Don't make a sound or you'll both die," one of them snarled, cold and merciless. The leader of the gang entered, seating himself calmly on a small couch in the room. His voice, masked by a device that distorted his tone, masking his voice, making it sound robotic and unrecognizable. "Today is the day I pay you back for what your dead father did to mine years ago." Dotun, wide-eyed with terror, pleaded, "Please, sir, I can give you any amount you want. Take anything. Just spare my wife and me, please." The leader's voice remained flat. "Oh, but I didn't come for your money. What will happen here tonight is a message to your father's camp. We reign supreme and always will." "Please, sir, I beg you, spare my husband. We haven't wronged anyone," Rose cried, her voice breaking with desperation. "Be quiet," the leader snapped, and then, with a flick of his hand, he signaled his men. The guns aimed at Dotun. Dotun reached for Rose's hand, gripping it in a final, silent goodbye before the gunshots echoed through the room. His body crumpled to the floor, lifeless. "No!" Rose screamed. She wanted to move, but the men did not let her. "Why are you doing this?" she sobbed, her voice trembling. "Take me too! You've killed my husband!" The leader barely spared her a glance. "You'll be fine. We didn't come for you tonight." As he said those words, Rose's tear-filled eyes fell to his shoes, and a startling realization hit her. They were the exact same shoes her brother McJohnson had worn to her wedding that very day. Her breath caught, her heart stilled, as she stared in horror, piecing together the impossible truth. The man who had walked her down the aisle might have been the same man who had just taken her husband's life. The man and his gang walked out, leaving Rose with her dead husband. Unable to withstand the shock, Rose's world went black, and she collapsed beside Doton's lifeless body. 3 weeks had passed in the big mansion. McJohnson sat in his office as usual this time, feeling fulfilled. He had exerted his revenge on his sworn enemy. I'm sure you're wondering how it all got to this point. So let me pause here to tell you something. You see, the thing is, McJohnson is the lord of a hard drug mafia group referred to as the Scorpions, the secret family business he inherited from his father after his father's life was taken before his eyes by their rival group, the Dragons, when he was only 7. The Dragons and the Scorpions were 2 rival factions of drug dealing. The Scorpions, now commanded by McJohnson, had been locked in a bitter feud with the Dragons for over a decade. McJohnson harbored a relentless grudge against the Dragons' former leader, Mr. Abeni, who had once ordered a hit on his father. For years, McJohnson had dreamed of exacting his revenge by taking Abeni's life. But fate intervened. Abeni died of cardiac arrest before McJohnson could act. Left with no other outlet for his vengeance, McJohnson turned his sights on Abeni's only son, Doton. Determined to fulfill his father's last wish, McJohnson plotted meticulously, orchestrating coincidental encounters between Doton and Rose, his little sister, until Doton fell helplessly in love with her. On their wedding night, Doton walked into a trap, completely unaware of McJohnson's plans to eliminate him. But what McJohnson never realized was that Doton was innocent. Unlike his father, Mr. Abeni, Doton had refused to inherit the family's drug empire, choosing a clean life far removed from the underworld that had ensnared his lineage. McJohnson's blind desire for vengeance had taken an innocent life and manipulated his own sister's trust. Now Rose sat in McJohnson's office, her face pale and hollowed by grief. She hadn't eaten or drunk in days, her heart broken beyond repair. When McJohnson tried to console her, she recoiled, then sank her teeth into his hand, drawing blood as her brother stifled a scream. You killed my husband," she whispered, her voice trembling with a quiet fury. "Are you going to tell me why?" But McJohnson dismissed her accusations, pretending she was delusional, and ordered his men to lock her away until she recovered. Seizing her only chance to escape, Rose fled into the night, vanishing from the city's shadows and eventually finding refuge in a rural town far from her brother's reach. There, in her solitude, she took up work as a cleaner at a girls' boarding school. Her once beautiful hair now tangled and her clothes tattered, she seemed like a ghost of her former self. People whispered about the mad woman in town, unaware of the pain she bore. But soon a darker truth settled in. Rose was carrying Doton's child, the last trace of the man McJohnson had taken from her. In the heart of the city, McJohnson was powerless over his sister's disappearance. With no other choice, he finally returned to his small mansion, where his only family now was. His 5-year-old daughter, Bambi, lived there entirely on her own. Months earlier, McJohnson's tumultuous marriage had ended in a bitter divorce, leaving behind only hatred between him and his ex-wife. The day Bambi's mother left, the little girl had stood by the window calling, "Please don't leave me, Mama, please come back." But her mother never looked back, her disdain for McJohnson spilling over into a cold abandonment of her child. Left in the void of loneliness and confusion, Bambi tried to understand why her mother had left. But every attempt to ask her father about her mother was met with silence or harshness. McJohnson had no time for her. He was lost in the web of his drug smuggling and the fortune it brought him. Consumed by his illicit empire and haunted by blood-soaked memories of murder, he couldn't afford even a fragment of compassion for his daughter. Instead, he poured his resentment toward his ex-wife, toward life itself, into his treatment of Bambi. She knew, even at her tender age, that her father resented her. In her isolation, Bambi stumbled across a stash of cocaine her father had left out carelessly, and out of innocent curiosity, she began using it. The effect was jarring, almost terrifying, but it numbed her loneliness, and soon she returned to it daily. One evening, McJohnson came home and caught her. "Where did you get this from?" he roared. Bambi, wide-eyed and confused, didn't know how to answer. That night marked the beginning of her nightmare. McJohnson unleashed a fury she hadn't known he possessed, striking her with a heavy stick, ignoring her cries for mercy. But Bambi, in her innocence, didn't understand what she had done wrong. She didn't know what the powder was, nor why her father hated her so intensely. From that day forward, McJohnson punished Bambi relentlessly, especially when he caught her with the powder again. Each mistake, each transgression was met with merciless blows. To him, Bambi became an outlet for all his inner turmoil, the weight of his crimes, his lies, his vengeance, crushing the spirit of a little girl who only longed for love. Yet despite the brutality, Bambi couldn't break free from the powder. The abuse became a twisted cycle. Enraged, McJohnson would lock up his daughter in a dark room, sometimes for days, leaving her bruised and hungry, thinking it might finally stop her from going to his cocaine. But each punishment only deepened Bambi's resentment and despair. The pain of abandonment from her mother, the agony of her father's beatings, began to take root as hatred within her young heart. By age 9, Bambi understood the truth about the powder. It was cocaine. She knew she should stop, but was too entangled, already an addict. She had become hardened, cold, much like her parents. At school, she lashed out, terrorizing classmates with ruthless aggression. Reports of her violent behavior flooded in, but McJohnson's solution was only more punishment, oblivious to the storm raging within his daughter's young soul. One day, exhausted by the constant trouble, McJohnson decided to send Bambi away, transferring her to his friend's distant, all-girls boarding school, the Glory High College. He couldn't bear Bambi's presence anymore, and the threat in his voice was chilling. He might kill her one day if she stayed. Yet this move of his would set the stage for something neither father nor daughter foresaw. In this new school, resentment burned even brighter in Bambi. She despised the place, unaware that this change would unravel more secrets, one that would twist her life and that of her father and Rose in ways no one could imagine. Meanwhile, with Bambi gone, McJohnson had only his haunted thoughts for company. He found himself constantly recalling his sister, Rose, wondering if she might one day bring justice down upon him. Would the police storm his mansion, dismantling his father's legacy, stripping him of the wealth and power he'd clung to? He knew he had to find her, to silence her before she could expose him. His men had searched tirelessly over the years, but Rose remained elusive, a ghost he couldn't capture. But fate. It had woven a far darker path, waiting to ensnare McJohnson, his daughter Bambi, and the sister he had so ruthlessly betrayed. Years later, Rose, now a middle-aged woman, had settled into her life as a cleaner at Glory High, the same school where Bambi was exiled by her father. Rose's life had been difficult, yet she found moments of light in her son, Gabriel. Gabriel, born with bright blue eyes like his father, Dotun, was a handsome young man. He had a beauty that set him apart from his peers. Yet due to the emotional turmoil Rose endured while carrying him, Gabriel was born both deaf and mute. Despite his disability and their humble life, Gabriel was a kind-hearted soul, known for his gentle nature and his readiness to help anyone in need. Gabriel would ask his mother to let him join her to work so he could assist her with the chores, but she would always refuse. Yet, if he wasn't studying at home, Gabriel would be found helping all the old people he could find in their small rural community. A few years passed, and Bambi, now a teenager, had adapted to her life in the secluded all-girls boarding school her father had chosen as her exile. With each passing year, her anger only grew, and she continued to spread pain wherever she went. Her father never allowed her to return home, keeping her out of sight and, in his mind, out of trouble. Yet, Bambi's wounds ran deep, and she took every opportunity to unleash her bitterness on others. It wasn't long before she found a partner in cruelty, Kike, another student known for her cold-hearted nature. The two became inseparable, united by a shared love for bullying and the secret stash of cocaine Bambi had smuggled from her father's house, which the two girls smoked together secretly. Together, they wielded their beauty and intelligence as weapons, ruling the school with iron fists. As head prefect, Bambi forced other girls into servitude, making them clean her shoes and complete her chores. The head teacher, Mrs. Amber, turned a blind eye, influenced by the generous donations from Bambi's father, McJohnson. Among Bambi's classmates was Amy, a quiet, gentle girl who idolized her. She dreamed of being accepted into Bambi's exclusive circle and mimicked her every move, even purchasing a bag identical to Bambi's infamous pink one. When Bambi's birthday approached, Amy saw her chance. She baked a cake and nervously presented it to her idol in the hallway. Bambi accepted the cake, her face unreadable, before sneering, "Who do you think you are? A pest like you trying to impress me?" With a swift motion, she smashed the cake onto Amy's head, sending the hallway into fits of laughter. As Amy ran away, humiliated and heartbroken, she vowed never to trust or idolize anyone again, sealing off a part of her heart to protect herself from the sting of rejection. Meanwhile, Rose's health took a downturn. Gabriel, ever willing to help, offered to take on her duties at Glory High temporarily. Soon, his presence caused a stir among the students. The girls, who had never seen a boy at their school, were captivated by his striking looks and mysterious aura. They would watch shyly as he worked, stealing glances and whispering about who would have the courage to approach him first. Bambi and Kike were no exceptions. They too were drawn to him, his vulnerability and quiet grace unlike anything they'd known. They watched from their window daily, entranced by his every move. Gabriel's disability only made him more intriguing, a handsome, silent enigma they could bend to their will. With each passing day, Bambi and Kike became more determined to make Gabriel, the boy who held the entire school's fascination, their own. Unbeknownst to Bambi, the young crush she longed for was her own cousin. Eager to win Gabriel's attention, Bambi and Kike began showering Gabriel with gifts each time he arrived at Glory High to help his mother. When they discovered he was deaf and mute, their attraction only deepened. His vulnerability made him an even easier target in their eyes, someone they could manipulate without consequence. Gabriel, however, remained unfazed by their advances. He accepted their gifts only to take them home to his mother, not letting himself be drawn into their games. Frustrated and driven by adolescent desire, Bambi and Kike grew bolder. They began dropping intimate items, such as their underwear, into the trash, knowing Gabriel would handle it as part of his duties. They hoped he would get the message when he sorted the garbage before burning it, but Gabriel, focused on caring for his mother and studying, kept silent about their actions, not even confiding in his mother Rose. Then, one day, the girls made a grave error. Among the discarded items, they unknowingly left a small bag of cocaine residue, evidence of their secret. By the time they realized it, Gabriel had already found it while sorting through the trash. Panic-stricken, Kike urged Bambi to act. "He's deaf and mute," Bambi scoffed dismissively, but then reconsidered. Gabriel could still read and write, and that made him a potential threat. The girls had to ensure he would keep their secret. The next day, the two girls approached Gabriel frantically, gesturing and attempting to communicate that he mustn't reveal what he'd seen. Gabriel simply stared at them, expressionless, and then returned to his tasks, seemingly unbothered by their frantic pleas. But Bambi and Kike couldn't shake their anxiety. A few weeks later, during the exam period in Bambi's class, all the students had dropped their bags in front of the class, as they always do before the exam starts. Bambi and Kike wrote their papers diligently, and so did Amy. After the exam was over, Amy, the classmate who had once admired Bambi, made a surprising discovery. After the exam, she accidentally grabbed Bambi's pink bag instead of her own. When she opened it on her way to the dormitory, her eyes widened at the sight of a small, white packet tucked inside, a remnant of Bambi's cocaine stash. A surge of vengeful satisfaction washed over Amy. This was her chance to pay Bambi back for the humiliation she'd endured. Amy went straight to the head teacher's office and reported the drugs, pleading with Mrs. Amber to keep her identity confidential to avoid retaliation. Mrs. Amber assured her that her name would be kept out of it. However, the moment Amy left, Mrs. Amber picked up the phone and called McJohnson, Bambi's father, revealing the situation. Furious, McJohnson realized that his daughter's recklessness had endangered not only herself but also his business and reputation. If word about the drugs got out, the police could be on his trail. But Mrs. Amber reassured McJohnson that she had the situation under control. After the exams, Mrs. Amber summoned Bambi to her office and confronted her about the allegations. Bambi initially denied it, but faced with the evidence, she broke down and admitted the truth. "If your father finds out," Mrs. Amber warned her, "you know what he's capable of, yet you act so recklessly." Bambi's mind spun. She was certain Gabriel had betrayed her, and she trembled at the thought of her father discovering her actions. Desperately, she pleaded with Mrs. Amber, "Please, don't tell my father. I'll do anything. Just don't let him know." The head teacher agreed, pretending she had not already told on Bambi to her father. Before she left, Bambi turned one last time to ask Mrs. Amber to reveal who exactly reported her. "It doesn't matter who reported you," Mrs. Amber replied coldly. "What matters is that you stop this behavior before you ruin everything." As Bambi left the office, fury seethed within her. She was convinced Gabriel had exposed her, and she was determined to make him pay. Alongside Kike, she devised a plan to silence him for good, hoping to instill such fear in Gabriel that he would never dare speak or write a word about what he had seen to anyone else. Unbeknownst to Bambi, it wasn't Gabriel who had reported her, but Amy, the girl she had once humiliated in front of the entire school. The night before their planned attack, Bambi and Kike took a heavy dose of their drugs to summon the courage to carry out their plan. Under the influence, they ambushed Gabriel, subjecting him to an unimaginable ordeal. In their haze, they went too far, leaving him broken and bleeding in the cold rain, abandoned to die. Their fury and recklessness had nearly claimed his life, but fate intervened, and Gabriel survived. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in the warmth of Grandma Funke's home. She had found him, rescued him from the rain, and was now tending to his wounds. "Do you remember who did this to you?" she asked gently, watching his battered face closely. Gabriel tried to recall the hazy, fragmented images from that night, but his memory faltered, the faces of the girls he saw blurred and indistinct. Grandma Funke encouraged him, urging him to hold on to the memories and find justice for the cruelty inflicted upon him. On hearing what had happened to her child, Rose ran frantically to Grandma Funke's house. When she arrived and saw her son's fragile state, her heart shattered. She embraced him, her tears mingling with the regret and sorrow she felt for all the suffering he had endured since birth. Despite her love, she had been powerless to protect her son from the world's cruelty. Meanwhile, Bambi and Kike walked the school halls as if nothing had happened, smug and confident that they had silenced their problem once and for all. But one fateful day, as Gabriel sat quietly in his disability school, the sky darkened and thunder roared outside. As lightning flashed, his memories came flooding back in a sudden, blinding rush. In that moment, he remembered clearly the faces of the two girls who had left him for dead. Gabriel confided in Grandma Funke, revealing everything he had remembered. Together, they devised a plan, a calculated strategy to bring down those who had tormented him, to topple the mighty and ensure that Bambi and Kike paid for their sins. Determined and emboldened, Gabriel returned to Glory High. He began appearing outside the classroom windows, silently watching Bambi and Kike. He became an omnipresent figure in their lives, haunting them like a spectre, always lurking in the shadows. In class, in the dormitory, and even late at night, Gabriel's figure loomed in the corners, his eyes fixed on them with a silent, unyielding intensity. Bambi and Kike were paralyzed with fear. They'd scream at him, "Go away! What do you want? You're dead! Leave us alone!" But each time, Gabriel would vanish as suddenly as he appeared, leaving them to question their own sanity. Soon, their guilt and terror spiraled into a frantic desperation. Haunted by their conscience and by the ghost of Gabriel, they finally broke down. The two girls went to the head teacher, confessing in broken whispers the terrible truth of what they had done to Gabriel the cleaner's son. They admitted to the assault and the night they'd left him to die, terrified that his spirit had come back to claim vengeance. Head teacher Amber listened in horror. She had known Bambi and Kike were bullies, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Yet, fearing for the school's reputation, she took swift action to protect Glory High from scandal. She called McJohnson, Bambi's powerful father, and laid everything out, proposing a secret meeting between him, the girls, and Rose, the school cleaner, Gabriel's mother. Mrs. Amber suggested they could handle the situation privately and offer Rose compensation to silence her permanently. McJohnson, however, couldn't rest that night. His mind reeled with anger and fear. From the moment Bambi was born, she had been nothing but trouble, and now her actions threatened to destroy everything he'd built. Sleepless, he resolved to do whatever it took to keep the details of the drug abuse and assault hidden from the authorities, even if it meant silencing anyone, any remaining eyewitness who might expose the truth. In the modest home she shared with Gabriel, Rose held her son close, vowing that they would get justice, no matter how poor or powerless they were. She promised him that despite the odds, those who had hurt him would pay. Gabriel, now with the strength of his mother's conviction, prepared himself for the confrontation. Embarking on a long journey the next day, McJohnson stormed into the school. When he saw Bambi, his fury was immediate. He slapped her hard across the face, raging at her reckless behavior and the shame she had brought upon him. Bambi sobbed, clutching Kike, who trembled beside her. They pleaded that it had all been a terrible mistake, that they were sorry, but McJohnson's voice was unyielding, thick with threats and condemnation. Mrs. Amber watched the scene, struggling to maintain order while they awaited Rose's arrival. An hour later, Rose entered the office with Gabriel by her side. The room fell silent as McJohnson turned to face the cleaner, who now held his daughter's fate in her hands, only to freeze in shock as he recognized her. Rose stared back, her face pale as the realization dawned on her. McJohnson, her estranged brother, the man who had ruined her life, was Bambi's father, the very man whose daughter had violated her son. The room became a tableau of horror and revelation. Bambi's tear-streaked face crumpled in fear when she saw Gabriel standing, alive, in the doorway. They had believed him dead. Now here he was, in the flesh, a living soul and a reminder of their cruelty. The truth unraveled in that room as secrets long buried came to light. Bambi had assaulted her own cousin, and McJohnson, who had orchestrated the suffering in Rose's life, now faced the undeniable consequences of his past. The head teacher, overwhelmed by the revelations of the afternoon, adjourned the meeting, realizing what she was dealing with was far beyond an ordinary matter. This was a dark web of family betrayal, violence and revenge that had spiraled into something uncontrollable. That evening, Rose sat with Gabriel, sharing the painful history she had once kept hidden. She told him about his birth, his father, and the trauma inflicted upon them by McJohnson. She held her son tightly as he absorbed the weight of the truth, the knowledge that his own family had been at the heart of his suffering. Gabriel listened, his grief deepening as he understood the full extent of what he'd endured at the hands of those who should have protected him. Meanwhile, Grandma Funker, hearing of the twisted family revelations, pledged her support to Rose. She knew that McJohnson would go to any length to silence them, to shield himself from the ruin that now loomed over his empire. But this time, Funker vowed, the poor will have justice. Back in the school, Bambi wept inconsolably in Kike's arms. The revelation of her actions filled her with a despair that left her contemplating escape, even suicide. She grappled with the bitter reality. She had committed incest, an unspeakable act against her own blood, a truth impossible to reconcile. The next day they all reconvened in the head teacher's office. The room was thick with tension as McJohnson faced Rose, his long-suffering sister, and the nephew he had never acknowledged. Shame etched itself deeply into his face as he took in the pain he had inflicted, finally realizing the depth of the destruction his ambition and cruelty had wrought. Bambi couldn't bring herself to meet Gabriel's gaze. Shame clung to her, heavy and suffocating. Head teacher Amber, desperate to protect the school's reputation, pleaded with Rose. "Thank goodness it's not murder at least," she whispered. "Please, Rose, for the sake of Glory High, let's settle this quietly. Name any price, and McJohnson will pay it. His daughter, your niece, is sorry for what happened. It was the drugs, the recklessness. Please, just this once, let her go. Do it for family." Rose and Gabriel stood there, hearts breaking anew. The weight of their helplessness pressed down on them. Poor and voiceless, they realized the school intended to bury the truth, to shield Bambi and McJohnson because of their money and power while denying them justice. As their hope began to dim, muffled sounds rose from outside the building, growing louder. Head teacher Amber went to the window and froze in shock. Outside, a crowd had gathered, voices swelling in unison, placards held high. "Justice for Gabriel! We demand justice!" Grandma Funker had told everyone she could find about Gabriel's suffering, about the injustices done to him, and the community had answered her call. No amount of money or influence could silence the voices of 100 people, let alone thousands. The story broke wide open. News spread, and soon the police arrived, arresting Bambi and Kike. Justice, long denied, had finally come. But what of McJohnson? He sat in his hotel room that night, gripped by a fear he'd never known. Bambi, his own daughter, was now a thread unraveling his life. For once, he was not in control. In desperation, he visited her in her cell before the trial. In the dim light, he leaned close, instructing her to lie. Tell them you did it under the influence of the drugs, that you got the drugs from the Dragon Group with money you have been stealing from me. Never reveal the real story, except you want to see your father rot in prison for life. Slip up, and I'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand?" Bambi, fearful and conditioned to obey, nodded, saying, "Yes, sir." But as she sat in court the next day, her nightmare began. The walls of the courtroom were lined with strangers, all watching, waiting to see what Bambi would say. And seated in the crowd, with eyes fixed intently on her, was Bambi's father McJohnson, silent and cold, his presence a dark reminder of all Bambi feared. The judge called upon the lawyer to question the defense. The lawyer began his questioning, probing Bambi with a calm intensity that left her no room to hide. Bambi swallowed, feeling the script her father had given her stick in her throat. I was under the influence. I got the drugs from the Dragon Group," she stammered, struggling to keep her gaze steady, knowing that McJohnson's eyes were on her, willing her to stay silent, to obey. But the lawyer didn't let up. "Bambi, are you aware that the Dragon Group has been under police custody for the past 3 years?" His voice was firm, unwavering, his words cutting through her carefully rehearsed lie. "According to the records, there's no way you could have gotten drugs from them. They've been dismantled." Bambi's heart raced as the weight of the lie she'd been told to carry began to crush her. Bambi turned, almost instinctively, her gaze drawn to her father. His face was a mask, but his eyes burned with an unmistakable warning. She knew that look. She'd seen it countless times before. A silent command to obey, to fear him more than anything else. But something inside her wavered, a tiny, fragile part of her. A voice she'd silenced long ago began to stir, whispering that this was her moment, her one chance to break free. She felt the old fear claw at her. But then, almost without realizing it, Bambi began to speak. I lied," she whispered, her voice trembling, the words barely audible. But once they'd left her lips, there was no turning back. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as she continued, and went on to reveal the truth about what happened that night, and all about her father's drug business, each word tearing at the bonds her father had wrapped around her soul. The courtroom erupted. McJohnson seethed, his face twisted with betrayal, as his empire of lies crumbled around him. His past, long hidden, was finally laid bare. He was sentenced to life in prison, condemned to rot in the darkness he had created. The great, untouchable leader of the Scorpion Group was finally brought down. And even as the walls closed around McJohnson, he clung to his bitterness, cursing the daughter who had dared defy him. Bambi and Kike were sentenced to 5 years imprisonment and also entered a rehabilitation center. They got clean off the drugs before serving their time. In the prison cell, Bambi began the arduous path to recovery. She faced the years of pain and hatred that had twisted her heart, slowly coming to terms with the darkness she had allowed to consume her. She learned that while the world might wound us deeply, it's our choice whether we let that darkness define us. Meanwhile, Rose and Gabriel returned to the mansion that had once symbolized all they'd lost. Though Gabriel would never speak or hear, his resilience had restored their dignity. They stood together, mother and son, stronger for the scars they bore. Bambi and Kike were left to confront the years of destruction they had sown. Bambi, in particular, grappled with the guilt of her actions and the shame of allowing her pain to transform her into a ruthless bully. She realized that surrendering to bitterness had only deepened her suffering, and that she'd inflicted on others the very darkness she'd wished to escape. As they moved forward, each of them, Rose, her son Gabriel, Bambi, carried the hard-earned wisdom that even in the face of cruelty and suffering, there remains a choice. Life may shroud us in darkness, but we must find the strength to resist it. In a world of shadows, even a single candle can illuminate the night. This story serves as a reminder that evil thrives only when we let it. Though life may test us, may tempt us to give in to despair or vengeance, the light within us, no matter how small, has the power to dispel even the deepest darkness. Fight for that light, nurture it, and never let the darkness of the world extinguish the goodness in your heart. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe for more interesting stories. Please like, share, and leave us a comment. To my amazing viewers, I love you all. Stay blessed, and I'll see you in my next story.